Well, Dad, one of the things I actually enjoyed growing up as a pastor's kid was was the time outside of Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. I enjoyed it. One, I loved after Sunday morning when it was a Lord's Supper day because I'd go into that back closet, particularly in Birmingham,
He
and I
was
would drink.
not ultra connected to communion. I just want to let y'all know that.
I enjoyed drinking the leftover juice, and then I'd sneak some of the back then. You had like the chiclet like bread wafers, like
Yeah, they're terrible.
just the little chiclets. I don't know. That's how they were. That was fun. I
Can you
enjoyed
hear?
learning.
Can you hear this verse? And the Lord said, "Break this chiclet."
that's that's just how I remember the Lord's Supper going. It was like little chiclets.
Little Zigga.
And then I loved running the halls. But one of the things I actually really enjoyed was the fellowship time outside of Sunday morning. There was one time I remember, I don't remember what church this was. I don't know if it was at your church or you brought me to this. It was a men's fellowship dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and they served the wild game.
Mm-hmm.
I think I ate rattlesnake, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly.
yeah. That was at Green Valley.
Okay, so it was at the church you were pastoring. It wasn't like a
Yes,
church you took me to and it brought me to this new culture.
yes. And you know what I did before I went to the supper?
You ate.
I filled up on cereal.
I have a vivid memory of that one. I think on and there's alligator. I remember that they had
Sure,
rattlesnake. They
I'm
had
sure there was.
alligator. They had all this crazy stuff.
Different
But
bird, different birds. They had the white meat of the quail, the dark meat of the dove. There was different things there.
that's right. That's right. But I remember those times as a kid. They were fun. They were foundational. But it was those non Sunday morning times that I think I actually enjoyed. I did love Sunday nights, by the way, when you preached. That was one of the best naps I had a whole week. I
Hey,
do remember that.
I
I'd
can
lay, I,
identify with that on 9 a.m. on Sundays these days.
Okay. Okay. Touche. 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 You just need to go to bed early. That's your problem now. Um, so it's those non Sunday morning times. The reason I say all that is we're going to talk a little bit today, not a little bit, we're going to talk about the whole time, about the origin of these non Sunday morning gatherings for the church. Particularly for this podcast episode, we're going to be looking at the Wednesday night meal in churches. Where did it come from? Why do you have it? Maybe even ask the question, is there still a place for it today? But before we jump into it, by the way, just want to introduce myself. If you're not familiar with me or my dad, my name is Jess Rayner. I am here with my dad, Thom Rayner. And this is the Church Answers podcast. We are so glad you're here. Before we jump into today's topic, I do want to thank one of our sponsors. We want to thank Cheney and Associates. If you don't know the name, you need to know it because they are the accounting firm for the church. They are all about coming alongside you as a church leader and helping you with your church finances or your church bookkeeping needs. They're all about letting you lead your church, and they do that by handling the numbers. They do a tremendous job no matter what church size you have, no matter what church size budget you have. They are there. They understand church. They understand leadership, and they're ready to provide those clear financial insights you need, particularly in the financial arena, to help you out. And they have a new podcast, newish. It's been out for a little bit.
A few months, but boy, it is one of the best out there in this area.
Yeah, it's called the Church Advisory Podcast. So if you're wanting to learn more about some financial matters, particularly, and even some administrative matters, go check out the Church Advisory Podcast. But go to CheneyAssociates.com/churchanswers. That's where you can connect with them and figure out what they can do for your church. The Wednesday night meal. Let's go down some history around here with the Wednesday night meal. Where did it come from? What was the origin? Let's start with the big question, talk a little bit about its practices and maybe what it is and how we could maybe potentially reclaim it today. But what's the origin, Dad?
Well, I'm going to answer your first set of questions, and I believe it was 3 of them.
It was setting the tone. I wasn't, asking you specifically to answer them. It was a tone setting segment of questions.
I understand they were rhetorical, but it's going to set us up for the specificity of what we're about to go into.
All right.
So I think that Wednesday night meals primarily started culturally, and we'll break that down.
Okay.
It then became largely irrelevant.
Okay.
And we'll break that down. And what we do not have necessarily in our show notes, but we can talk about it at least briefly. I think the future is big for this and similar events. So that's
Okay.
that's my overview. So let's talk about, where did it come from? There are different theories of origin. Like most, probably came from different sources. One fed the other. You'll never be able to find out which one came first. Most people don't realize, Jess, that, and I'm old enough because I talked to my parents about this. I'm not old enough. Well, I'm old enough for a lot of things, but I'm not old enough to actually remember this. But it was the formation of the post-war suburbs. Now, what was going on? Johnny came marching home again from World War II.
Okay.
The baby boomers were primarily the generation coming home. There were some earlier ones that were coming, older ones that were coming home, but they began to form. They wanted homes. The idea of owning a home was big, and the government started providing funds for those homes, and naturally the market adapted to it, and they began developing what we would now call subdivisions, and at the time in massive numbers, that formed suburbs from the main city or the nearby city, because you could not build that many homes in a city area and make it affordable. And then you had the GI housing bill, which allowed them to get it at almost nothing. I remember my dad, I'm trying to remember what he said he paid for the house, was like $6,000 or $7,000. And I used to think his rate was really low. It's 2.5%, but we almost got down to that in recent years. And so what happened is you had a new surge of people, similar age, vets, usually married, wanting children or having children.
Okay.
And so that began to be somewhat of a homogeneous unit that then said, if we're going to go to church, wouldn't it be nice if we got together and had a meal together? And it became a gathering place for what was forming as the suburbs. The church said they like getting together. Let's give them a meal. And we think that may be the second biggest source of the Wednesday night service, growth of it.
Okay.
Right. It was going before then. So I want to make clear that does not necessarily the first step, but it caused
put it on the map.
It put it on the map as more growth than anything else at that point.
Okay. All right. And that's fascinating. I had no idea. This is why I love coming on the Church Answers podcast, is because I learned so much about the local church. So post World War II, they all come back. I didn't, obviously wasn't around during this. So I didn't know about the GI Bill, but learned a little bit. There was a hunger. There's a pun, unintended pun too. But there's a hunger for fellowship, a hunger for just coming together to be a part of the body of Christ. And so, and two, the season of life they're in really kind of brought it together. So you're saying that the Wednesday night meal actually put it on the map for young families.
Yes, it was already on the map. And it was especially already on the map in small towns. We'll get to that in just a moment, and we'll look at that origin. But there have been 3 distinct phases of the Wednesday night meal, maybe 4, and we'll get to those in just a minute. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that's the growth engine for it. The post-World War II boom needs to be studied again and again and again. It's one of the biggest sociological phenomena of our nation. And it affected so many things. And I was one of those kids born during that baby boom. And so even though I wasn't part of World War II, my dad fought in World War II. My uncle fought in World War II. 2 uncles fought in World War II. And it was a time that I can just simply say I did not realize how unprecedented and how massive it was. And it affected the Wednesday night supper, which is our topic.
Well, I love the fact that it was for young families. I never would have anticipated that, because growing up, watching the Wednesday night meal, it was not young families for the most part.
It became the gray hairs.
It did. All right.
Blue
So
hairs.
it started off, the origin of the Wednesday night meal in many churches start off, we're talking about this cultural phenomenon. I don't know if phenomenon is maybe a strong word, but anyway, it was a post-war suburbs mindset. Then you said it became irrelevant, though.
Yep.
So explain that.
It became irrelevant because it forgot its purpose. If you do something just because it's the way that you've always done it, then it's going to die. Its purpose was to bring people together for intentional fellowship. it started taking on multifold purposes that caused it to be diluted. And people are saying, I don't know why I'm here. This is probably not a good example, but you know me, I'm prone to do the not good examples. But I recently had my place cleaned. Every now and then I want to do a deep cleaning of my house, and I don't do that. Your mother doesn't clean houses, but at least she doesn't cook. So, you know, she's not available either. And so just recently, and it was yesterday, was booking someone to come do it, and they told me that I had to send in a second and a third form. And you know me, Jess, I'm not much for bureaucracy. I don't like things in my inbox. They'd already sent me 5 things just to get 3 cleaners over there. So I just finally called them. I said, why are you doing all this? They said, oh, it's our policy. That's not good to tell me that. I said, do you know why it's your policy? That's not an answer. You are just telling me what in the internal lingo is. Why are you doing this? Well, I was not very Christ-like in my interaction with her. Wasn't ugly, but wasn't sweet either. And what I found out the more I talked to her is they did it because of previous things that caused them to still do it, and they could do away with it. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. It's just something that they're a reaction to something that happened,
and
so they let a past event dictate future precedent.
They didn't know why. Even the head of customer service did not know why they did it. Her talking point was, it's policy. Like, that's going to satisfy me? Nope.
So going back to the Wednesday night meal, it became irrelevant just because it became something they did and they lost their purpose. Do you think, because I'm thinking too from a millennial standpoint, do you think that the culture began to meet that need outside the church? I'm thinking sports programs, PTAs, even particular, just, gyms, CrossFits. Do you think that it became irrelevant just because the culture stepped in where the church didn't? Is that a part of it?
Mm-hmm. Definitely is part of it. And your last line was probably the best one. The culture stepped in because the church did not.
Okay.
The churches often blame culture. Oh, it's the sports league. Oh, it's how busy they are. And the list goes on and on. What has happened is church has acquiesced. And it's primarily the fault of my generation. That's another story into itself. We'll probably have a podcast. How did the boomers make church not only irrelevant, but also low expectations too? Okay. And so the fewer things that we truly said, this is part of being a disciple. You need to do this. Even fellowship is part of being a disciple. The more the world stepped in and the more culture became, you come to this. You watch it, Jess. Sports leagues, if half the Christians on sports leagues would say, we love participating in this, but we won't be here. We won't be able to be here on Sunday morning. The sports leagues would change.
Yeah, particularly NFL. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So the idea of the culture stepped in, made it one of the factors that the Wednesday night meal became irrelevant. So that's the history. Mm-hmm. We looked at, really culturally speaking, why it started. Then we see a decline because it became irrelevant for many different reasons, but we highlighted the most of them. Now the question, and I think we're going to hit this on the second half of this podcast, is there a future for it? But before we do that, before we look at the future, I think if you are wanting to think about the future of your church, and you want to think about maybe is there something you can do to make sure you don't become irrelevant as a church, is to make sure you're reaching your community. And so we want to take a minute here and just thank our other sponsor for this podcast, Upward Sports. They are all about making sure your church continues to reach those young families, to reach any family in your community, to make sure your church does not become irrelevant. And they want to help you reach your community through sports. Go check out upward.org/runcoach, upward.org/runcoach, because here's what they're going to do. They're going to help you develop a 5K for your community. As a church leader, you get a chance.
That's an easy entry point too.
Super easy. This is running for adults, and they love to come alongside and offer a 5K challenge. They'll have tailored training plans. anywhere from runners to walkers. They have a running club app. They're going to help you. It's simple to start. Just need 1 leader. You don't need a facility for this one. If you're a church planner and you're not even having a facility that you have on a regular basis, you can do this. Any church can do this. Go to upward.org/runcoach and just know that with reaching the community, the future's bright. The future's bright. So that's where we left off with the idea of the Wednesday night meal.
And remember, its primary purpose was to reclaim fellowship.
Okay.
I don't think you can neatly categorize the purposes of the church much as Warren has and I have, but I like to say that there's 6 purposes to the church: prayer, evangelism, discipleship, ministry, worship, fellowship.
Okay.
And if those are the purposes of the church, what are we doing intentionally on each of those purposes? And so even though it may not have been an overt attempt of most church leaders to reclaim or to say, okay, this is what we're going to do for the fellowship purpose, it did serve its purpose well, because that was the original purpose, was to bring people together as Christians one to another. But then it began to evolve again. And this was a good evolution. Mm-hmm. It became an evangelistic tool.
Okay.
The generation that was going, and again, primarily at the time frame I'm thinking about, there are other times, but the time frame I'm thinking about was families with young children. They began to make connections in the community and brought them to church. And the 2 quickest entry points, neither one of them was the worship service. One was Bible study.
Okay.
Sunday school, community group, life group. The other was the meal.
Everyone loves a free meal.
Everyone loves a free meal, but everyone back then, with the exception of a few introverts, I'm sure, wanted the fellowship time.
Right.
And right. Think about it. Many of these veterans who were leading the way, sure, they'd had good fellowship, but it's been on the battlefield.
Right. And so it's a different kind of fellowship. But it's also, like you said, easy way to also invite people.
It was.
An evangelistic tool. Hey, come get a free meal with me. We're going to do some Bible study afterwards. Come hang out. And so that, you're saying that became part of the, not resurgence, but at least there's a future in it.
Yeah.
So it went from culturally speaking to irrelevant to then it starts coming back in some ways.
And it's closely related to this is the precedent for revival, the tradition of revival. I'm not talking about revivalism, but I'm talking about the days where you actually had revivals. And many times, because you're asking people to come on multiple nights, you begin to feed them. Mm-hmm. And that became somewhat of the precedent for our Wednesday night. Oh, we were doing this for 5 nights in a row. We're going to feed them. Longest revival I ever went to was 14 days in a row.
That's awesome.
It was. Most of them in my day were 7 days. Okay. Sunday to a Sunday, or Saturday to a Sunday, whatever the case may be. Saturday to, yes. Anyway, 6-7 days. And there typically was a meal served in there, because you were asking people to come from work, come from school, and you'd have this guest preacher. I remember some of the best spiritually nourishing times I can remember, those revivals. And, I'm just thinking about how many hours I put into that in the course of a week. And you went with me to some of them, and your brothers did. And I don't know if we dragged you to the 2-week long one, but we dragged you to the 3 and 4 day long one. And
I think that's where I got squeaky.
You got squeaky then?
I think so. I think it's one of those trips.
That's where I was preaching a revival.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And I told you, if you would be good, you were going with me, I would let you pick out a toy.
At the gas station.
At the gas station, which is where everybody should shop for toys. And that's what
I remember that. Sorry. I just had to walk down memory lane when you were describing that. I was like, I remember getting squeaky. I wonder what happened to that bird. It was a fake bird. It was I don't know. I love that thing.
I don't know why you did. And I can't remember where we traveled to, Jess. It was out of town. I know that.
Okay. So it was when you're going somewhere. It wasn't at your local church. Okay. So here, squeaky aside. Sorry, that was for if you're listening to us, I apologize for that.
You got the 2 family members with all their secrets.
Yeah. So here's if I'm listening to this podcast, if I'm going, all right, should I do this for my church? I think that is the looming question everyone's thinking about. All right, so we talked about it's a way to reclaim fellowship. It's an evangelistic tool. There was a precedent from the revival tradition. Should I do this? Would you recommend it?
It depends.
Incredible answer.
It's a good answer because it means I realize that it is contextual. We need to mention one other purpose, that's support for programming.
Sure.
Many of the programs evolved into Wednesday night programs.
Okay.
It could be children's choir. It could be a mission organization. And like in Southern Baptists, it was RAs or Royal Ambassadors or GAs, Girls in Action, but multiple ways. Okay, we got Wednesday night. Let's throw programs in there too. I don't know if that was a good thing to do, but it became the place where programs are supported. Now let's get back to your question. Should it be done today? The answer is, if you are doing fellowship well in any means whatsoever, you don't have to add one more thing. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking for a path to bring people together where it's not sitting in a room studying the Bible, that's small groups, where it's not listening to a pastor, that's worship, where they're just enjoying the time with one another without any of these other things, it could be. And I think the path probably to go is what you do, Jess, which is periodic fellowship times. Yeah. Could the church at Spring Hill sustain a Wednesday night service every week? Probably not. And there's a lot that's contextual in there that I wouldn't unpack. But you can say, we're going to have a Sunday night meal. We're going to have a Wednesday night meal, whatever the case may be. The question is, what are you doing to fulfill your purpose of fellowship in the church?
Right. Yeah. Our what we do right now is at least once a quarter. That's the minimum. We do a Sunday afternoon fellowship. And so, we had one a couple weeks ago out at our church property.
Missed it. Your mom said it was great.
It was great. We just called it Picnic at the Property. And so
the creativity of Rainers. Mm-hmm. What are we going to call our church at Spring Hill? We're going to call it Church at Spring Hill. Yeah. Hey, we've got this organization that provides answers to churches. What are we going to call it? Oh, Church Answers.
That's it. Hey, we're going to go eat at the property, like have a picnic. What should we call it? Picnic at the property. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we do that at least once a quarter. But what's interesting is I'm hearing more and more from my church family about how they want more. So
the analog church is on the way, and that is such a statement that nobody has an idea what I'm talking about, but you will in the months ahead.
Yeah. There's been a growing desire. There's some plans in the fall for our church. So if you're one of my church members and you're listening to this, you'll get a little sneak peek. We're going to be doing some intentional thing with our men's and women's ministries. And so we're talking about doing some monthly gatherings. And then the women's director in our church said, well, how about we do a dinner before we do the ministry events? And I'm just like, there it is. There's the Wednesday. And it's most likely we're going to do first Wednesdays of the month. Men and women's will have specific gatherings, one for men, one for women, but talking about before it actually coming together for a meal. So
you know what we could do? We could start a senior adult men's ministry for the three of us.
That's about enough people for you. That's about your back. So there is a place for it. That maybe your church does need that. And my church has not always needed that, always wanted it, but right now they do. And so I think it is something to figure out, like, what's your church hungry for? And so there's a big, and especially at the Church of Spring Hill, we're talking about the fact that, we're a church family and we come together that way. Mm-hmm. And there's this growing desire of just spending time with each other. We're in the middle of VBS week this week. We do an evening VBS. Tonight's our last night. And what happens after every VBS is we go invade the Taco Bell just down the road. So it's the after party. And there's like 40 to 50 us in this Taco Bell. And we give them a heads up. We let them know we're coming. We don't overwhelm them. They have staff for it. They just, last night I did not get home till 10 o'clock.
Wow.
Because we were just hanging out as a church family, eating just the healthiest meal you can imagine. So
that's vegetables and meat. It's good for you.
There's no vegetables at Taco Bell.
I thought there were tomatoes in there.
Maybe. I don't know. But isn't tomato a fruit? So,
okay, fruits and vegetables.
I don't know if there's any vegetables at Taco Bell. I don't know if that exists. At least I've never tried it. So this has been interesting. Just to think about the origin, the history, the pattern, but even think about the future. Ask a question. Is this something you think that maybe once a quarter Test it out at your church. I think there, as you mentioned, there's this growing desire to be in community, and especially when it's centered around God's truth. It's powerful. It's a powerful community. It's a great way to draw people into the church as well. So think about it. If you're a church leader, maybe it has a place. Test it out. Give it a go. I don't think if anyone's going to complain about having a meal at least once, and see the response. Maybe it's a growth mechanism for your church.
Sure.
Well, we asked the question, and we did our best to answer the question here at the Church Answers podcast. What is the origin of the Wednesday night meal in many churches? And so we talked about it, and we looked at the future. So hopefully you're able to walk away from this podcast with maybe an idea, maybe something that's practical for your church. Maybe that's something that's going to help see growth in your church. Before we wrap this one up, we do want to thank Cheney Associates one more time. They are one of our sponsors for this podcast. They have their own podcast, the Church Advisory Podcast, where they're talking about administrative and financial matters of the church. And so go check them out, give them a listen.
It's also easy to remember. Church Advisory Podcast, Church Answers Podcast, Church A Podcast.
CAP. Oh, I like that. I like that. Here's something else that's easy to remember. Go to CheneyAssociates.com/Church Answers. Combine those two. CheneyAssociates.com/Church Answers. If you have any bookkeeping or financial needs, go talk to them. Any church, any size, any budget, they are there to help you. It's a great opportunity just to get a phone call with them and just see what they can do. They're all about helping you save time. They're all about providing the right information, particularly financial insights, so you can make real good ministry decisions. So go check out CheneyAssociates.com/Church Answers. Well, this was about the Wednesday night meal. And here's the cool thing is we're going to talk about another evening in the church, the Sunday evenings service on our next podcast. And so we hope you will follow along. We hope you'll listen and hopefully learn a few things along the way. We're so glad you continue to join us at the Church Answers podcast. Again, my name is Jess Rayner. This is Thom Rayner. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.